Hi guys, this is Shubham and this is third video in the series Project Pandas. And in this video, we will be seeing how to explore and draw inference from our data frame. So first, we'll do the same thing. We would import pandas pd and we would load the data frame as CSV. We would pass the path of the Titanic dataset and the description is the link to the data is attached in the description. Now let's load it. And one thing I would like to point out is when you see the data frame, it's by default just shows the upper five values and the lower five values. But what if you were exploring dataset visually and you wanted more inputs? You wanted the inputs from above the first 20 or 30 or last 20 or 30 inputs. What you could do is you could use the head and tail parameter. So if you just use dot head data frame dot head, it would by default show you the first five entries, but what you can do is you can pass in here the numbers of entries that you want to see. So let's pass 10. Now you see that it is showing the 10 first 10 entries. Accordingly, you can pass 50. It's showing you the first 50. Another thing, what it shows you the first 50 entries. Now let's say you want to see the 50 entries from the bottom. What you could do is df dot tail pass in 50. It will show you the bottom 50 entries. So let's keep it 5. Fine. So let's just explore, let's just understand the data first. In any problem, it's better to understand the data. First thing we have is passenger ID. So we would want to use passenger ID as the index column. So now it has been set as passenger ID. Now let's see. First, so this data set basically contains the data about the people who were in the Titanic cruise ship. Unfortunately, the people who embarked before it sank. So this column represents whether the people who embarked on it survived or not. Zero stands that they didn't, and one that they did survive it. Second is the P class. It says basically the passenger class they were in. There are I know from the description that there are three categories, and we will also be inferring that from the data itself. Let's say you just have the data, you don't have the description. So we will be exploring how you can get how many number of passenger classes are present in here. Next thing is name of the passenger, sex of the passenger, his age was, and this as sibling SIB stands for number of sibling and spouses they had on the ship. So again, and this is parents or children they had on the ships. Then this is the ticket number. This is probably the most superfluous column because you won't find any inference from it. What can you get from the ticket number? Second is the fare, and third is in which kind of cabin they were in. So here you see a lot of NaN values. Basically, NaN stands for null values. It's the NumPy representation of the null values, and Pandas is built on top of NumPy. So you see that. And third is embark. It shows basically there are three different kind of not three different ports that from where they embark their journey. So let's see. So now we now understand the data. Let's try to draw some inference from it. So first thing I would like to know about this is what to treat. So here we see that these contain only two entries, 0 and 1. So should we treat it as an integer or a different class? Or same thing with parents and class. And in the eighth section we see here it's not an integer but a float. but still it's a number. So how should we treat it? Should we also treat it as a integer or a class? And then the text data, we have no option but to treat them as objects, or again. And so here, what if in the survived column, instead of 0 and 1, we had survived and not survived, these two things? So how would we have treated them? So let's see how Pandas had loaded them by default. For that, we can use the command df.info. So what .info does is, so it tells you about the columns that you have. First thing you would see is the column name and the number of non-null entries. And it is being treated as an integer for now, but we know it should be treated as an object or a class. So that's something to keep in mind that we would have to rectify later. Then again, the P class, here the passenger class, this should also have been treated as an object, but it is being treated as an integer. So let's even on the name again, its only option is to treat it as an object. Name, sex, and age is again treated as a float. So it's right here. And so those of you who don't know what float is basically any number with a decimal point. And again, you see, so none of either they have been treated as an object or a float or an integer. So that's the inference that you get from .info. But let's say we want to know some statistical information about it. From info, we know how many non-null entries we have. Like you can see in the cabin, it has most number of null values. So, uh, but now we want to know the statistical properties of the data. And for that, what we could do is we could use a function called describe. So here, you see all the columns which were either treated as integer or as floats are present here, because for them only we can draw statistical inference based on numbers. So that is the case here. First thing is we get is the count, which is same for most, and as you can see, age has some null entries. We can tally it from here, 714 null values, so the count here comes 714. And then we have the mean survival rate. So if you see, the mean survival rate doesn't look good, it's just zero point 0.3. So it means that most of the people died. And so mean age is 29. So you can see the standard deviation. You can see what is the minimum here. It would be 0, obviously. The smallest persons, the youngest person on was not even a year old on Titanic. What its value at 25%, or what its median is, what its next interquartile ratio. The 75% is what is the maximum. So the oldest passenger was 80. Highest fare paid was $512 or pounds. 512, let's say currency. Let's treat it as currency, as we don't know if it's was dollar or pound. And the lowest fare paid was 0. Someone traveled for actually free. So that's great. So it was all about drawing inference, and what really comes in handy is info and describe. That describes you in a nutshell the properties of the data. So that's pretty much it for this video. Stay tuned for more, and we will delve deeper into this.